Meet Farouk. Farouk runs a company in Kenya that sustainably produces honey called Honey Care Africa. Honey Care Africa is a small and medium-sized enterprise, or SME. Business is going well, and Farouk needs $300,000 to scale up production to meet demand. Were Farouk in a developed country, he would have 4 options to get this funding: banks, government grants, personal networks, or third-party investment. However, Farouk is in Kenya, and these options are largely unavailable there. In Africa, only 0.05% of individuals have access to adequate banking and capital acquisition services. This would be like only 10 students in the entire student body of OU having access to these services, so it is unlikely that this is an option for Farouk. Similarly, Kenya scores a 27 on Transparency International's corruption rating index, with 0 being completely corrupt and 100 being perfectly transparent, so government funding is also unlikely for Farouk. It is not likely that Farouk would be able to approach family and friends to borrow money because 90% of African adults make less than $10,000 in their entire lifetime. A $300,000 loan would be out of the question. Third-party investment isn't available because of low investor confidence. A Deloitte survey of investor confidence reports that US investors are 40% less confident in investing in emerging markets than in home markets. Unfortunately, Farouk's situation is not unique. There is currently a funding gap to SMEs in emerging markets estimated at $850 billion worldwide. Arrow Global Capital is an organization currently in the process of attaining 501c3 nonprofit status that looks to close this funding gap and stimulate economic growth by distributing wealth that has been accrued through an innovative guarantee model to entrepreneurs like Farouk in emerging markets. My name is Alex Eggleston, and I'm a religious studies and English senior.
My name is Daniel Meshter, and I'm an Arabic and economics junior.
My name is Nick Aguilera, and I'm an international and area studies senior.
My name is Sam Stringer, and I'm a finance and entrepreneurship senior.
At the beginning of this semester, our team was handed the idea for this innovative funding model, and over the course of this semester, we've developed it into a plan ready for pilot implementation. Now, as we've seen with Farouk's situation, traditional routes for SME funding are inadequate in emerging markets. This means that they can't get the funding between $100,000 and $1 million that they need, and this has led to the significant funding gap. This funding gap means that the SME sector of economies in emerging markets are 55% smaller and create 35% less GDP in emerging markets than their counterparts in more developed countries. So how do we address this funding gap to SMEs in emerging markets? Unfortunately, the first 3 problems are institutional. However, low investor confidence due to perceived risk in investing in emerging markets is an issue that can be addressed. Arrow Global Capital addresses the issue of low investor confidence and bolsters third-party investment through a sophisticated investment strategy that targets niche, scalable SMEs through vettors in-country. These vettors are business incubators, accelerators, and investment advisory firms that offer business support to their client SMEs. SMEs that have received this type of business support are up to 35% more likely to succeed than those that have not, according to the World Bank. This investment strategy is coupled with an innovative guarantee model that de-risks the bank and, in the case of a default, spreads risk throughout a pool of guarantors, thereby mitigating individual investment risk. These are the 4 key components of Arrow Global Capital's SME funding model that we will detail throughout this presentation. Now, Daniel will tell you more about the SMEs and vettors that Arrow will be working with.
Thank you, Alex. Before we talk about the risk mitigation devices that Arrow uses in its SME investment strategy, let's step back and look at SME investment in general. As proven by the experience of the Acumen and Small Enterprise Assistance Fund, SMEs represent a vast socioeconomic investment potential. On average, every single $1 million that these funds invest in emerging market SMEs, 309 jobs are created. Additionally, CEF has estimated that for every dollar invested in an emerging market SME, there are $13 worth of positive impact in those SMEs' communities. Our team recommends that Arrow invest in medium-sized SMEs to optimize this social impact and minimize its investment risk. Medium-sized SMEs are the largest kind of small business as categorized by the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank. Of the 28 million SMEs in emerging markets, medium-sized SMEs make up 8%. Now, while this may seem like a small proportion, that's still 2.34 million SMEs that are available for Arrow to invest in. And when we look at their proportion in that $850 billion funding gap that Alex mentioned earlier, we see that medium-sized SMEs make up about a quarter, which translates to $204 billion of investment opportunity for Arrow moving forward. In addition to this outsized impact on the SME funding gap, medium-sized SMEs represent Arrow's best investment opportunity for risk mitigation, since they have the lowest rate of default on loans of any SME in emerging markets. So now that we've discussed medium SMEs in the context of emerging markets, let's look at a specific example, one with which you're already familiar. For Rook's business, Honeycare Africa currently nets $650,000 in annual revenue per year, employs 34 workers, and needs a $300,000 loan to scale its operations. All these figures fit firmly within the range typical of medium-sized SMEs. Additionally, Farouk's business stands poised to impact a $12 billion honey market, selling its products both domestically in Kenya and around the world. This means great potential benefit for the small-holding farmers who source Honeycare Africa's product, and it is this kind of impact growth potential that Arrow looks for in its medium SME investees. Finally, Honeycare Africa is currently a client of Open Capital Advisors, an investment advisory firm that provides business support services to its SME clients. Cornerstone will invest in these SMEs that are clients of Vetters like Open Capital Advisors, because the business support services that Vetters like OCA provide to SMEs are a key part of Arrow's investment risk mitigation strategy. To that end, our team has narrowed down a list of 285 vetting organizations in emerging markets and brokered tentative investment relationships with 3: Romcom, Open Capital Advisors, and Emerging Market Entrepreneurs. These 3 in-country vetters typify the risk mitigation that Arrow's future investment partners will offer. First, their geographic diversity minimizes Arrow's investment risk due to a foreign currency crisis. Second, their SME clients' industrial spread ensures that Arrow's investment risk due to potential industrial collapse is also mitigated. Finally, each of these vetters has agreed to provide loan monitoring services for Arrow, thus ensuring a repayment of Arrow's investment. In sum, Arrow will invest in medium-sized SMEs utilizing the risk mitigations offered by a partnership with in-country vetting organizations. So now that I've discussed the capital distribution side of Arrow's business model, let's turn to the acquisition side. Here's Nick to tell you a little bit more about Arrow's innovative guarantee model.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Arrow Global Capital seeks to acquire capital through a guarantee mechanism that allows for the negotiation of a guarantee-backed credit facility with a stateside bank. This guarantee mechanism has 2 primary functions. It de-risks both the bank and the guarantors. A guarantee is a legal agreement with Arrow Global Capital, a stateside bank, and high net worth individuals that legally guarantees that the bank will be repaid in the case of an SME loan default. As a result of being de-risked, the bank is willing to lend from its excess reserves, which currently number at $1.9 trillion in United States banks. Each guarantee is signed for $1 million. However, only half of that is borrowed against, as a capital buffer that is an additional de-risking tactic for the bank. This would allow for the negotiation of a $2 million credit facility. Understanding how banks are de-risked, it's important to note how guarantors are also de-risked when participating in this pool. The primary means by doing so is spreading the risk of the guarantors amongst the pool of guarantors. In the case of a hypothetical $20,000 default, rather than having all $20,000 fall on the shoulders of one guarantor, Instead, each guarantor would share a $5,000 coverage stake. As more guarantors join the pool, risk decreases accordingly. In the event of a loan default and having to provide capital to make up for a loan payment lost, the guarantee's capital would be considered a tax-deductible donation due to the 501c3 status of Arrow Global Capital. These inherent risk mitigating capacities of the guarantee mechanism are attractive to a high net worth individual guarantor. However, there are additional reasons to participate. Guarantors' assets remain unaffected when participating as a guarantor in the model, with the understanding that they could be called upon in the case of a default. What this means is that they can continue operating in investment accounts, growing and accruing interest, while simultaneously enabling funding for entrepreneurs like Farouk in emerging market economies. By enabling funding for entrepreneurs to scale their businesses and provide steady employment, Arrow guarantors can know that they are providing a tangible social and economic impact in emerging market economies, this being that $13 multiplier that Daniel mentioned earlier. So, understanding the guarantee mechanism and why a guarantor would want to participate in the model, it's important to note that the guarantee model has been successfully implemented in the past. Microcredit Enterprises has successfully employed this guarantee mechanism in the field of microfinance institution investing. Over 7 years of operation, they've attracted 83 guarantors to their program and unlocked $121 million in idle capital. However, per $1 million invested in a microfinance institution, only 6.8 jobs are created. Remembering the SME investment job creation potential that Daniel talked about earlier, you can see that there is a massive increased job creation potential in SME investment compared to microfinance investment. It's this increased impact, along with the work that our team has done this semester, advancing the guarantee model into the SME investment space, that has actually led microcredit enterprises to approach Arrow Global Capital throughout the course of this semester, seeking a business partnership. Here's Sam to discuss the details of that partnership process.
Thank you, Nick. So this partnership has the potential to provide great benefits to both microcredit enterprises and Arrow Global Capital. As Nick mentioned, MCE approached Arrow with the idea of a partnership because they're seeking greater impact in their investment. And Arrow provides this through the unique SME investment model that our team has been working to develop this semester. Additionally, Arrow provides detailed guarantor marketing strategies as well as recommendations for potential guarantor networks that our team has built. On the other side of this, Microcredit Enterprises brings their existing pool of 83 guarantors, their 501c3 nonprofit status, and their bank relationships they've built over the years that give them access to capital at significantly lower rates than what Arrow could obtain on its own. All of which can take up to a year or more to develop and are vitally important to Arrow upon startup. The reduced cost of capital is one of the greatest benefits of partnership to Arrow. By partnering with Microcredit Enterprises, Arrow can obtain a cost of capital on a guarantee-backed credit facility of just 3%. This is significantly lower than what they could obtain on their own. On the other side of this, the average interest rate on a loan to an SME in a lesser developed country is 12%. So this means that Arrow will be earning interest revenue at 12% while only paying an interest expense of 3%. It's this differential that allows Arrow to cover its costs, become sustainable, and eventually begin earning a profit that it can continue to reinvest into SMEs. So as this models out, we see that Arrow's revenues are driven by the amount of loans they give out each year. We've estimated the average loan size to be $250,000, and we've taken into account a 6% default rate as determined by the World Bank. The main operational costs consist of salaries. Within the pilot program, there will be no paid employees. Then moving into scaling, having one loan officer and one executive director, adding an additional loan officer in year 3. We determined that one loan officer can take on roughly 8 new loans a year, so the addition of a loan officer in year 3 allows Arrow to further scale its loan operations. The other main costs are the financing costs. Within the pilot program, Arrow will be soliciting donations in order to cash collateralize a loan, thus obtaining a 2% interest rate. Then moving into scaling and setting up a guarantee-backed credit facility, Arrow will be able to obtain a 3% interest rate through the MCE partnership that I mentioned earlier. So when we bring all this together, we see that after just 1 year of scaled operations within this partnership, Arrow Global Capital can be operating sustainably and begin earning that profit to reinvest. And over this first 5 years, Arrow will have invested nearly $17 million into SMEs. And bringing back the 309 jobs for $1 million invested and the $13 multiplier that Daniel mentioned earlier, we see that in just 5 years of scaled operations, Arrow can create over 5,000 jobs and nearly $218 million in economic impact. Over the course of this semester, our team has been fortunate to make the initial steps in affecting this level of impact. We've conducted detailed research in the most beneficial organizational structure that Arrow Global Capital should take. We've narrowed down a list of 285 potential vendor organizations and developed relationships with 3 of them. And we've created detailed marketing strategies to attract guarantors to the model, and all of this has allowed for a potential partnership with microcredit enterprises that brings both additional guarantors and the vital bank relationship. And we've integrated all of this into a detailed financial model. So moving forward as we finish this semester, we're going to be compiling all of these materials for our inventors, Chad and Tara Jordan. They're going to be using them to continue the 501c3 incorporation process, negotiate the microcredit enterprises partnership, all while continuing to recruit guarantors and vendors to this model, with the goal of best positioning Arrow Global Capital to be successful upon pilot and begin implementing this impact. We'd like to thank the CCEW staff for all of their help and guidance throughout the semester. We'd also like to extend a thanks to our team leader, Anoop Ball, our inventors, Chad and Tara Jordan, and our mentors, Andy Scherer and DJ Newsom. We'd like to thank you all for coming. Now we'd like to open the floor for questions. Dr. Holmes? So the question is what does Arrow bring to MCE that they're not able to do by themselves already? So our work this semester has spent a lot of time really developing the SME investment model. So MCE has spent a lot of their focus in microfinance. And as we've shown, SME investment has the potential to create a lot more impact. And so through the detailed model that we've created, as well as the relationships we've already developed with incubators, we can offer that to them to increase their impact and investment. I mean, that's the thing is we've done the work already. We've done the work behind it. And yeah, they could go do that, but it's the partnership that we've developed with them and the relationship we've developed them that make them interested in partnering with us. Well, so the way that we've approached this with MC and the way they've approached us is, within nonprofits, they see no reason to compete against each other because we all have the same end goal of creating as much impact as we can. And so by joining forces, we get rid of that competitive aspect and just multiply the impact. Yes.
So part of the reason that we've created this model is to address that massive funding gap that Alex showed us at the beginning of this presentation. Unlike in the US, there isn't a lot of funding infrastructure to support small businesses. Whereas in the US, the government is relatively uncorrupt, and there are lots of banks who are willing to loan to SMEs. So we, by impacting this funding gap, allow the startup of businesses that are really just not there. Whereas in the US, you already have SMEs. In emerging markets, they don't really exist in the numbers that we see in the developed world. So every new SME that's founded has outsized impact, which makes CEEF's numbers and stats seem a little more plausible. Also, I'd like to note that Honeycare Africa is an agribusiness company, and as I mentioned, aggregates the product of smallholding farmers. Those 34 employees that are directly employed by it are just the employees of Honeycare Africa, but it draws on a network of over 300 smallholding farmers. And that's not even counting the economic benefit that those farmers' participation in Honeycare Africa's business model nets their families. So when you start to think about how these businesses impact their communities within emerging markets, we see that the kind of impact that we're forecasting is in fact plausible. Yes.
So the question is, what have we, through our conversations with incubators, what have we seen that the industry is most interested in, correct?
So on the incubator side of the business model, what's generated the most buzz is the fact that Arrow will provide debt financing to SMEs or loans. The thing is that to medium SMEs especially, but to SMEs in general, there is a massive lack of debt financing because currently most SMEs in emerging markets are funded via equity. So the fact that Arrow will provide patient working capital to SMEs means that it fills their funding need while they scale their operations outside of the SME range. So that's what's generated a lot of excitement on the SME side of things. But what's generated a lot of excitement on the actual investor funding side of things is the guarantee model. The way that it allows assets of guarantors to remain untouched while simultaneously affecting real-world impact in lesser developed countries is something that actually gets potential high-net-worth guarantors really jazzed up based on our conversations. So those are the two sides of the model that have generated the most industry buzz.
So the question is, what incentives do guarantors get out of this outside of just philanthropic reasons, or is that it?
Based on our conversations with microcredit enterprises and our conversations with potential high net worth individuals, it is primarily philanthropic motivation to participate in this sort of model. However, we have explored the opportunity of offering first right of refusal upon successful initial funding.
So the question is, I believe there's two parts. So one was, why would the guarantor not just give their money or make this investment themselves? And would the bank even be doing this at this low of interest rate, especially? So as Nick mentioned, the reason the guarantors are involved in this is because, yes, they could give their money, but if they can also leave their money in an investment account, say earning 8% after tax, while it's also allowing Farouk to have a $300,000 loan, not only do they get the benefit of their investment, but they also get the philanthropic feel-good of allowing that to happen. On the bank side of it, so there are actually 3 banks already doing this with microcredit enterprises. So they've negotiated their credit facilities at 3%, and through our conversations with other banks, we've determined that with a full cash collateralization, like within the pilot program, as I mentioned, we can obtain a 2% rate. And so yes, there are also a lot of regulations going along with where the money is going and going overseas, but that kind of risk also falls into gaining this 501c3 status that we've addressed, because we have to prove that the money is going where we're saying it's going. And that's where these veteran organizations help, because we partner with reputable veteran organizations, and using their SMEs, it's a lot easier to show that that's where the money is actually going. And that's their main concern. So the question is, how do we ensure that the money is indeed going to an SME owner like Farouk versus another investment due to the corruption? Okay, exactly.
Okay, so this is where the veteran organizations really play the most important part. So the reason it's so important to develop these relationships that we've begun developing is because we have to have, first, faith that the veteran organizations are going to be able to do their job. And it is very important that they are in country, able to monitor Farouk's business and where this money is going. And with these veterans, they are actually able to be on the ground and monitoring this and able to report back to us about the status of Farouk's company, the loan. And so this is really an important risk mitigation factor that the veterans provide.